The Flump is a 2-mana white creature that is a jellyfish. Considered a jellyfish, which I really like, the creature type there. It's a rare and from the new set, and it is a 0/4, so it has no attack, a lot of defense, and it's called a defender. A defender means that the creature can't attack. It is not able to attack. It has flying, and it says, whenever Flump is dealt damage, you and target opponent each draw a card. Flumps siphon thoughts and energy from evil aberrations and are often eager to share the dark knowledge they obtain with friendly adventurers. Interesting. So, what do you think of this thing?
I think this is interesting. I can't figure out how it's gonna play in standard or historic. It does make your attacks really bad, and then like damaging spells really bad, because then you're just cantripping them, and it soaks up some of the damage. So I think something to be aware of is if you're going to remove this off the board with a spell, like the person is essentially like dodging 4 damage. If you're attacking, they get a free card. I still think you attack into it if you can, even despite them getting a card.
If you can kill it, right?
If you can kill it. If you can't kill it, they just don't attack. And yeah, I think this is cool. What's interesting is like this spray. The spray like almost gave the effect of like movement for the orc's face. I think that's an orc. It almost looked like there was movement, but it's just the spray in general.
I think it might be a bugbear based on the big ears and the underbite.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So Flumps actually move around by farting. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that whatsoever.
Yeah, so the Flump in the art is actually farting in the orc's or in the bugbear's face, which I really love. I think it's a great kind of cute little moment. So yeah, when a Flump takes damage or when it moves around, it uses its gas to do so, and when it moves around, it makes a little noise. So it's not really a fart. It's not like, you know, farting out of its butt necessarily, but that's how it moves, and it makes a little farty noise. Which is kind of cute.
That's amazing.
So the first art in all of Magic the Gathering to have a little toot on it.
It would be cool if this Flump, like, if you attacked it, if a creature attacks it, it gets like a -1/-1 counter. That would probably be like even cooler, because then it like really disincentivize attacks. And even if you attack through it properly, like your creature's down -1/-1. I think that'd be a really cool thing.
Yeah. That would be cool. And based on the art, that would make a lot of sense, you know, like get a little retaliation for hitting it kind of thing. Yeah, I like that.
And I think the reason why, like, encompassing the lore plus the mechanics, when it's dealt damage, target opponent, you and target opponent each draw a card, is because there's telepathy. Like, Flumps are known for telepathy, and that's how I believe they communicate. So I think that's the flavor. Like, you're still getting the flavor through the mechanic of whenever you deal it damage, you know, you and the opponent get to draw a card. So, or target opponent if you're playing commander, you select 2.
That's true. And also Flumps are known to be around like really evil things. Like that's kind of their thing, is they siphon the energy, as it says in the flavor text. They siphon thoughts and energy from evil aberrations like beholders. So that's where they get their energy from. And then they share that knowledge with adventurers to warn them of the dangers of a beholder, because they're good. The Flumps are good.
I didn't know that. I just looked it up, and I was like, I didn't know like Flumps are actually like put down as lawful good.
Yeah,
I did not know that was like a whole thing.
Yeah, they're actually good. So I think that's also part of the mechanic there. It's like they siphon the evil energy by getting hit, you know, for damage, and then they give that energy in good by drawing a card for you and an opponent type thing. So I think this card in standard is going to be iffy. There's going to need to be some kind of really nice payoff for having I think a Flump in play. You know, they had a card a few sets ago, I think, that would let defenders attack and use their toughness as attack, which would be a nice payoff for something like this to run in your deck. I think that this card is really actually incredible in Commander, but only in specific scenarios. If you're running a card like Pestilence, which is 2 black. It's an enchantment. You can pay 1 black to deal 1 damage to all creatures. You can just do that, 1 damage to all creatures, and you draw a card, you choose an opponent to draw a card, then you do it like 2 more times. The Flump's at 1 health, you pass turn. If you've got more black mana up on the next turn, you do it again. You draw 3 more cards for one black each. That seems really strong to me. So I think the Flump is really good in sets or decks that can really abuse that 1 damage mechanic. But I think otherwise it's kind of just a neat card.
Yeah. Also, like, fight spells come to mind, right?
Yeah.
For commander, or you're speaking into, there's a lot of those commander effects or even commanders that exchange or not exchange, but use toughness as a power. So it's going to be like a 4/4 defending fly or defender flying, which I don't know if it. There are also cards that say, like, if this thing has defender, it can also attack. I think that's a card. I might be wrong here, but
I think so too.
Yeah. So then, you have a 4/4 flying. If it gets dealt damage, you get to draw a card. So it makes their blocks even more awkward too, because then it's like you're just getting a card for attacking, and then if you have fight spells too, you can draw a card by just hitting something lesser. So I think there's some work to be done to make Flump good, but I think in maybe commander decks that have fight mechanics, or not fight mechanics, wall mechanics. Mm-hmm. I think it's an easy slide into there, because I don't know if there's many walls that say, like, draw a card if it's dealt damage, or draw a card because it's a wall. Like,
right.
There's not many. There's ones like ETBs. I know there's like enter the battlefield stuff, but
this is actually cool. Similar to the enrage mechanic, I believe it was called, from Ixalan, the dinosaurs, that when it takes damage, it does something. This is similar to that mechanic, just a little slightly different. And I had a buddy who had a dinosaur deck, and he ran those. I think it was called Pyroclasm or something. It's an enchantment that it does the same as Pestilence. It's 1 red, deal 1 damage to all creatures, and he just did that all the time. So yeah, this card can be abused, but it needs a good build around.
Yeah.
All right, still staying on the Flump. This is an interesting thing that was revealed. The art cards that come in set boosters are actually going to have a use now, other than just being an art card. So on one side, it'll assumedly have the art, and on the back side, it has the stats for the creature if you want to play it in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. What do you think of this?
I think it's a good way to get get more hype from D&D players or MTG players to kind of cross over. I don't know if it might do a little bit of percentage of, like, bringing MTG players into D&D, but I think it's just going to, not directly, I think indirectly it's going to do that, because, like, someone who plays both, or someone who's interested in D&D, like, maybe their friends like, oh, that's a really cool thing, like, with not just with Swamp card, but with many cards that have this style, it can be a way to start the conversation. That's what I should say. Mm-hmm. I think this is a good conversation starter. I don't think it inherently is going to direct people, from Magic the Gathering into D&D, but I think it's a good conversation starter, and that's how you get, like, players to the table, and I think that's good, unless you're really strong-willed, like, about doing something when you see it.
Right.
But I think it starts a conversation of either or. And I think it's the art. I really like how they did the art. I think there's a lot to appreciate here, in the sense of they combined Magic the Gathering cards and the D&D pages like perfectly. Mm-hmm. Especially how it has the fade to the text stuff, and then the art in the upper corner.
And that's the magic art.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it probably took a lot of formatting, and the D&D team's really good at formatting things. So I wouldn't doubt that, like, the D&D team mostly led the art cards in this sense, because I've listened to, like, the Dragon Talk with Greg Tito and Shelly Mazanoble, and they'll talk to, some of the people who make the book and the pages, and they, it sounds like lots and lots and lots of effort is just getting the pages just perfectly right for each page. And so it would be my belief, or I'm making like I think a good educated guess, that the D&D team mostly took the forefront of designing this card, even though it's an MTG card.
I would imagine so too. They put kind of the most important things here on the card, and I think this will be a great collector's item for people who play D&D and want to kind of get into Magic. It'll be great for them to kind of collect their monster manual of monsters. I think that's pretty cool, and it leaves open the door for another AFR set later down the line for them to collect more of those monsters and really fill out that whole kind of thing, which is cool. I like that. Obviously, it does kind of stink that the attacks, for example, Telepathic Shroud, Tendrils, and Stench Spray, nobody knows what those do, even though they're there. But what's cool about that is you can kind of imagine what they do, and it might get you curious enough to go looking for what it does, which is kind of nice. So I think it's really cool. I think it's a great idea. And shout out to Brian Valesa for the awesome art.
I want to add another thing, just as an aside, like WotC and D&D are headed in really interesting directions. And with that being said, honestly, if some player brings an art card to my table and they know what the card does, I'm just going to trust them and say, like, yeah, you play that card as if it's the actual card. Yeah. I think that, we're heading in some interesting directions, and we were talking about this offline about another thing. And I think, hey, I think that should be, if this is the place that starts it, hey, I think people should be more open to people just playing the art cards at the table and treating it as if it's the card. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that takes a lot of, memory for like knowing that it's 1 and a white, it's got a 0/4 health. But other than that, I mean, I think that no matter what, if you got a card and you want to play it and everyone knows what it does, I don't see the problem in playing it at all. Because making the game accessible for the most amount of people is great for the game. Mm-hmm. So, and great for us as players. So,
oh yeah.
All right, next new card is Tasha's Hideous Laughter.
Yes. A wonderful, this is so good.
D&D spell. It's got awesome art here. It's 1 generic mana and 2 blue mana. So this is a blue card. It's a sorcery. It's a rare from the set, and it reads this ability: each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library, and then until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. This is a really strange mechanic here. Let's read the flavor text too. The raging Behir reared back, opened its terrible maw, and collapsed in a fit of horrifying giggles. What are we thinking?
There's so much going on here, and I love it. I love the adventurer here. They're showing a little bit of diversity there. Mm-hmm. I love the art, and you can visibly see, like, even though this is a creature that's like not known to most people, or even like maybe even a D&D player, I like the what do they call it, the anthropomorphizing of like laughter, and it's very clear here, and it's really good to include the flavor text.
It's even clutching at its stomach like it's laughing.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's like so well done. And then you also see like a magic effect. It almost looks like there's a splashing effect radiating from the caster's feet. Like, yeah, and that little detail is really good. I don't know if Behirs have lightning or thunder, but you also see some of that emanating out of the creature's mouth. So
I believe they do.
There's like an aspect of danger, but it's laughing. So there's so much going on just art wise with this card that it's so wonderful and so good. The cave art also just 10 out of 10.
Noticing now that you mentioned the lightning, that's where the light is coming from this card. That's what's lighting up the scene, is the lightning from the mouth, which is really ominous if you think about it. Can you imagine being in that situation and the only light that you have is this terrifying, like horrifying giggling happening next to you from this huge creature?
Oh yeah. This is great. This brings a whole bunch of memories of like me being a DM or someone being a DM, and like, all right, there's this huge creature laughing. Like, what would a huge creature that's scary sound like laughing? Like, it really pulls some improv in. To talk about the mechanics of the card, I don't know how I feel about this in Commander, because Commander, you're playing spells normally within like I would say the average CMC in most commander decks are like 3 or 4, mostly 4 or 5, depending on like how strong your deck is.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to mill like maybe 6 cards. I would say is probably about the average.
So I
Maybe
think it's a
because
good
like
guess. 6 or
you
7.
mill
Yeah.
you mill a land, you mill a a huge spell, you mill artifact that's like 1, but like you probably would only mill like 6 or 7 cards. So it's like, oh, okay, whatever. Like it's a cheeky spell. But I think this card in anything that's 60 cards as a side, well, 75 cards, but in the sideboard, I think it's a good sideboard card against like decks I love playing, which are like sacrifice decks and things that are like 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana CMC. Now you're milling like, you can mill a third of their deck easy with something like this. And it's exiled. So I think that's like a super powerful effect for only 3 mana. You're like, I just want to take care of a third of your deck real quick so I don't have to worry about it. And that's, I know as a sacrifice player, I would be like, oh my gosh, like this card just 1 for 20'd me. Like that exchange is brutal. So I think this is a good sideboard piece for sure.
I agree. I think this card has an interesting word on it that makes it okay for commander, but not great. The word each opponent. Each opponent
I didn't see that.
exiles, which is cool. So you get 60, I guess 60 mana worth of stuff set across 3 decks if you're casting this in a 4-player commander game.
Yeah, if you're a mill deck, this could be okay. And if you had like recursion from your spells,
or copy it like 3 times.
Yeah, if you like stormed it, that would be pretty strong. It could even have some CDH potential too, because then if you're it's CMC. Low, and then like CDH, you can remove their combo piece, like just by playing this card. So it'd be interesting if you have a CDH mill deck. I think this goes in the CDH mill deck.
So CEDH, for everyone who doesn't know, that's competitive commander. That's competitive EDH. Commander's a multiplayer format, 4-player format, and in those competitive decks, the average converted mana cost, the mana cost that's up here in the top right of the card, the average is very low. So this card is going to get a lot more bang for its buck in a deck that's much smaller in its spell costs, because you have to get 20 or more value out of those spells before it stops. So in a CDH deck, instead of getting 6 to 7 cards, you're probably on average going to get 15, 16 cards.
Yeah.
So not too bad. I also heard that this card is going to break Legacy.
Oh, I have zero clue. I'm just getting into Modern. No idea about Legacy.
So Legacy is like the oldest format, and it has cards from every set ever made. And the average CMC is 1 of a Legacy deck. So in a 60 card format, that's pretty big, especially when a lot of your spells are 0 mana, Lion's Eye Diamonds, and Mishra's Baubles, and
it's like half your deck. That's half your deck gone.
So it'll depend, obviously, on the Legacy deck. There are a lot of Legacy decks that like to cheat in giant creatures, so those decks won't be quite as hurt by this. But those decks that want to storm off, those Urza's decks, those kinds of things are going to get really hurt by this thing, especially because the exile. Exile means no more. You don't get it back. Okay, Samsoni in the chat says Legacy has Reanimator, Ad Nauseam, Cloud Post, new Delver deck with Murktide, so it would have, but not anymore. Fair enough. That makes sense. Okay. I think this was announced before Modern Horizons 2 even came out, so that's when I heard it was like a month ago.
Yeah. Samsoni's my friend I was talking about offline a second ago, so good to see you here, Samsoni. Yeah.
Hi, Samsoni. Thanks for being here. All right. Next up, we have a reprint from many other sets. This card's been printed a bunch of times. This is Evolving Wilds. It is a colorless land that you can sacrifice and search your library for any basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So it is a land that searches for a land. And it has some beautiful art here. And let's read the flavor text as well. Parts of Faerun still churn with the magic of arrogant Netherese archmages long dead. Interesting.
Oh, yeah. I believe if I remember Netherese correct, or like usually in any kind of world that's WotC oriented or something like that, I think Netherese are usually like the oldest Magocracy human being or humanoids. I think that's what the Netherese are. And they're usually like wiped out or something. I could be incorrect here, but I think that's what it's like speaking into. And then Evolving Wilds, like this card is used in lots of places. Like you'll definitely jam it in your commander deck because you just need to get a land card that you need for the color that you need. I really like the art here. The transitioning is really well done as far as like you got your mountain, you got your island, like your water there, you got your forest. Swamp is always like kind of hard to figure out, but it's the transition between the water and everything.
Sure.
I don't see plains, but oh well. It's great. It's a great card, and anytime I see Evolving Wilds, I kind of like to think of like, this is probably a place where Narset would visit, like because like Narset's always about like really interesting mana terrain, and so I feel like Narset would probably be like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, so I feel like Narset is definitely gonna be like, I could easily in my head put Narset, and I have in like D&D games. Like I think Narset's a really interesting and easy planeswalker to put in your D&D games because one, planeswalker, and two, she likes looking at mysteries and stuff like that, and D&D is like classically riddled with mysteries and stuff.
True.
And she's a good person, so it's like easy if you need a little bit of Deus Ex Machina, or I think I said that right. Like if you need a good one of those and you need to get your players from one place to another, like Narset is just so good at that. She's like, oh, I looked and peered into the cosmos or peered into, time and saw that you folks, you're the key to get something going. And I know you folks don't have a point A to point B and your players get stuck. You're like, here's this amazing planeswalker. They're here to planeswalk you from one place to another so you can continue on and be a good like NPC throughout the campaign or whatever. So I think these are all the things I just get from just looking at this Evolving Wilds card.
Yeah, I think this is the coolest Evolving Wilds art that I've seen in a long time. I think they do some really interesting things on those Evolving Wilds arts because it's all about a land that can be any land, a land that could turn into any land, or a land that is being destroyed and then is going to be reborn as a new land. And so I think they did a really cool job, as you said, putting all of the different types of lands that you can find in Magic in here. I think what's going on is you've got a mountain up there at the top. You've got a forest on the right-hand side with the kind of bright green trees. And then I think these dark green shorter trees are the swamp, I'm hoping.
Yeah,
and then
I
you've
think
got
so too.
The island in the middle. And I imagine the sunset is kind of their way of doing the plains.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Yep. That's
so, I think you were right. I didn't notice that until you pointed it out. But I think that's really cool that they have kind of all the lands on here. There's even a rainbow
that you can
see.
The rainbow right there. I was going to mention it. Yeah, it's so good.
So I think Mohammed Firdaus did a really awesome job with the art here. A card that you're going to see a lot, and especially in if you play like casual commander, things like that, you're going to see Evolving Wilds a lot. You're going to maybe see it in your limited pods when you go to pre-release night, when people are playing 2-color decks in pre-release. They're trying to make their cards work, so they're going to shove in as many Evolving Wilds as they can to make sure that they get the lands they need. So yeah, you'll see the card.
Do we have this one has the not to jump the gun, but do we have the special art for this one, the D&D art?
We do.
There it is. This one's sick too. Like it looks like there's an elf like ranger-esque person and then like a warrior. It's definitely a warrior. I don't think barbarians like carry.
Yeah, that'd be like a fighter probably.
Fighter, that's what I meant. Yeah. Wow, where's my knowledge?
No, you
but definitely a fighter. And then you kind of get the same feeling of like all the mixed terrain of like it's nice and bright. So you have that, plains effect. You have forests. You have water. Swamp is somewhere in the mix, and then you have a lot of terrain which is mountain-esque. So, and then I think this is actually more directly would get MTG players into D&D more so than like those little art cards, because this is just like, oh, this thing's sick. It's a little bit more evocative, I think.
Oh yeah, this is gonna catch the eye of people. And when I first saw it, I didn't know it was a Magic card. I couldn't even tell I saw the words Evolving Wilds, and I thought this was a dungeon module, like it said. I thought it was.
Yeah.
I really did. I thought it was a Dungeons and Dragons adventure until I was like looking at on Twitter and actually read the caption, and it was like somebody complaining about the art, and I was like, well, why are you complaining? Just don't use it. Like, if you don't like it, don't use it. This is cool. Like, for a lot of people that really like it. And you know, I think that's something that if I have one criticism for the Magic the Gathering community, it's like, if I don't like it, then it's bad. It's like, just relax. You don't have to use that version of it.
Yeah, especially when there's versions. Like, there's 11 versions of Evolving Wilds. Like, take your pick. Like, this isn't gonna ruin everything. Like, take your pick for Evolving Wilds. There's, you know, there might even be a secret layer. There is a secret layer Evolving Wilds. There's the Bob Rosses. I own the Bob Ross. Like, take your pick. Like, there's Evolving Wilds through all of Magic the Gathering. This doesn't have to be yours. And now that someone is tilted about it, I'm probably gonna pick this up and jam it in so I can tilt players when I play, when I play competitively. I'm like, is this bother you? Great, you're off your game. Awesome, let's continue on.
I agree with you. I think this is a cool card with really interesting implications for how far they can go with the art in Magic and still have it be a Magic card. I think that this is going to draw in a lot of like old D&D fans who remember this kind of book art. And I'm curious to know if Brian Snoddy, the artist for this card, if he made this art specifically for Evolving Wilds, or if this is in their backlog of the actual like adventures from like the 1970s, 80s.
Or if it's someone who was an artist at that time, like has retired or kept doing art, and then has revisited an old style. That would also be really interesting.
I should have done more research on that.
It almost seems that way because you have a lot of those like good, deep contrast paint strokes, but then you have the lighting effects of like modern era like art of like, done through, I don't know, not Photoshop, whatever art application artists are using. I'm not an artist. I'm not going to pretend like I know. But the lighting effects to me suggest that, like, from the top down to that huge piece of rock, make me think it's a newer application. But you see a lot of the deep contrast colors that artists of old would use. So,
yeah, I think you did a really awesome job. And again, if you don't like the card art, that's fine. Like, it's fine that you don't like it. Just don't use it. Thank you, Malice, for the sub 6 months in a row. Thank you so much, Malice, for the sub. We've got one more land to look at that looks just like this one. Have you seen Den of the Bugbear? This is a new land, a rare from the set. This one we should have mentioned from the Evolving Wilds one. The Evolving Wilds, it said an adventure for characters level 1 to 4, so it was like a starting adventure. For kind of D&D, and that makes sense because Evolving Wilds is very much like a starter card, whereas this card has a quite a bit going on, and I like that it's a level 17 to 20. It's kind of higher level, rarer card. It's got some pretty awesome art, so let's talk about it for a second. Let's read it. It's a land, a rare. It says, if you control 2 or more other lands, Den of the Bugbear enters the battlefield tapped. So it's a negative if this is your third or later land drop. You wanted this to be early on. It taps to add 1 red mana. So it's kind of like a mountain in that it adds just a red mana. It's got 1 ability, and it says you can pay 3 generic mana and a red mana. You don't tap it for this. You don't have to tap it at all. It says until end of turn, Den of the Bugbear becomes a 3/2 red goblin creature token with, whenever this creature attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. It's still a land. So this is what we call a man land in Magic. It's a land that can turn into a creature. This one in particular for 4 mana. And it becomes a 3/2 goblin, which is a bugbear. A bugbear is considered part of the goblin family. It's just a larger version. And when it attacks, it makes an extra goblin with it, like a little goblin that follows it that's also attacking. But it doesn't say it has to be attacking the same player, which is kind of cool. So if you're in Commander, you can have your little 1/1 red goblin attacking somebody else. But yeah, what do you think of this thing?
I think it's great. I guess I'll talk about the D&D part and then the Magic part because it flows really well. adventures for characters 17 to 20 that you mentioned is really scary because you think like bugbears are like usually like middle of the run or early beginner adventure stuff, and then it's like 17 through 20. What's going on in this bugbear den? Like,
True.
bugbears aren't supposed to be that threatening, but you know, you have it's a character 17 to 20. Like, there's something horrifying or like unbeknownst to the adventurers that they're going into, because bugbears are like for characters level 4 to like 8. Like, that's generally bugbear territory.
Hey, if you're 4 level 17 adventurers and you get 100 goblins coming at you, that's deadly encounter right there.
I don't. Yeah, I could maybe. If you don't have like a magic caster, then yes. But like, if you do, you can like eliminate swaths. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Let's see. If you I have well, I got to talk in ways that are safe. So if you control 2 or more other lands, then the bugbear enters the battlefield tapped. So this means you have to either play this as your first or second land, right?
Unless, I mean, you can play it as your third. It's just going to enter tapped,
to be
which
untapped,
is crappy.
To be,
yeah.
What I meant is to, sometimes my brain gets ahead of me. ADHD.
No, you're good.
So for it to be untapped, first or second land, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay. Which is great. Like, if you see this this is perfect in the sense of like, you see this in your opening hand, it's like easier to think of like, I'm going to keep this, like, because, you know, unless your lands kind of tap weird, you're multicolored and there's more things to consider. But I think if you're playing 1 or 2 lands, it's easier to be like, yeah, snap. It's not a snap, but it's easier to make a decision. It's a quicker decision point. And then I know that I didn't even know these things are called man lands, but I know that these type of lands are popular in historic right now, or at least one. There's like a couple. No, they're popular in historic because like control decks play them with like the one white land that makes creatures, and then the black deck the mono black deck that the aggressive deck that, you know, turns the den into a creature as well.
Okay.
I think.
This is in Magic the Gathering Arena?
Yeah, this is an arena historic. Yeah. So I think this could see play in the historic format. I think in standard, I don't know how I feel about this. Because 4 mana is a lot, even for like a red aggressive deck, and I feel like control would be a lot happier with this. Mm-hmm. Because it's 4 mana. Later on, you create some 1/1s. Because the creature with whenever this creature attacks, create. So like, I think it might be better with control in standard. In historic, I could see aggressive playing because you just have more things to do. I don't. As far as older formats go, I don't know how Den of the Bugbear is going to perform, and the art is super good too. This I feel more so that it was a back catalog of art, because just the colors are so wild and the contrast is so big and the lighting effects aren't as strong as the other one was. So yeah, I think this is a cool card.
I agree. I think the card is cool. I agree that I think it's probably going to do better in a control deck. I think, though, that in like a mono red aggro deck, it can be nice when you have no cards in hand because you've thrown out all your goblins and your lightning bolts already, to have something to do with your 4 mana and like make your 3/2 and make an extra 1/1. So it ends up being a 4/3 in terms of damage and stats that you have each time you swing, which is not too bad. Downside being, you know, you got to worry if you're a new player, you turn this land into a creature and then your opponent kills it. They've 2-for-1 to you. They've killed a creature and they've killed your land, which means that now you're gonna have access to less mana on your future turns. So just be careful using this card. I think it'll be cool. I think it'll be pretty strong in limited, which is like pre-release night, where you have to open up your packs and kind of play with the deck that you're given. I think it's gonna be pretty nice in there. But for the most part, I think Den of the Bugbear is not gonna make a huge splash in most formats, but it will be cool in the formats that it does show up in. I'm sure someone will find a way to break it.
Yeah, it's also that argument of like, now that we have these lands, like modal lands and all these different type of lands that do something else, it's so weird to like figure out how much we're at the point of Magic where it's like, how much basics do you really keep? Because there's so much value to just jam one of these because it's free, right? It's almost free, other than it coming tapped if you have more than 2 lands, but
Right.
it's like a free effect that you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna jam this because this is just utility, so it's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right. Next up, we are going to start getting into the big mechanic for the set.
Ooh.
We're going to start off with Nadar, Selfless Paladin.
Sick.
2 generic mana and a white for a legendary creature, Dragon Knight. So both a dragon and a knight, which is very cool. It is a rare from the set. It has Vigilance, which means it does not tap when it's attacking. It stays untapped and gets to attack. It says whenever Nadar, Selfless Paladin, enters the battlefield or attacks, so enters or attacks, it says venture into the dungeon. In parentheses, it says enter the first room or advance to the next room. We'll get to that next in the next card I'm going to show. And it says other creatures you control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. Now, do you think I should show the dungeon cards first, or do you think we should just talk about this one and then go into dungeon cards?
We should show the dungeon cards because just to kind of be seamless for people's logic so they don't have to do extra work.
All right, so Nadar, when he enters the battlefield, you pull out one of these dungeon cards. We'll start off with Dungeon of the Mad Mage. This is a card you keep next to your deck. It's not in your deck, it's next to it. And you can have a pile of them, and you can have as many of them as you want. There's a few from the set. I'll kind of give you a preview here. We have 3 that we're going to go over today. This, I think, is the most complicated one, so let's start with a simpler one. Let's go to Lost Mines of Pandelver. This one's a little simpler. We'll start off with this one. So when Nadar, that Dragon Knight, when he enters the battlefield, you enter in from the top of the card into the first room. It says Cave Entrance, Scry 1. So when Nadar enters the battlefield, you choose your dungeon. In this case, if you chose Lost Mine of Pandelver, you would, when Nadar enters, you would scry 1 because you entered the dungeon and you entered into the first room. Then, when he attacks, it says venture into the dungeon again, which means now you pick a room. You see there's 2 options. So from this first room, you can go left or right. If you go left into the Goblin Lair, you create a 1/1 Goblin creature token. If you go right into the Mine Tunnels, you create a treasure token. So in this case, when Nadar attacks, he's either going to make you a 1/1 goblin or a treasure token. And then you go on and so forth throughout the rest of the dungeon until you reach the end of it. And once you've reached the end of it, I think I guess I don't even know. If you reach the end, is it over or do you have to venture out of the dungeon once you're in the last room? I don't know. I'll look it up while you're talking about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is another, it's kind of cool because like I think this adds another dimension of difficulty, or not difficulty, but another dimension of mechanics to a game, and it's friendly enough, and it gets D&D players involved too. Like I almost feel weirdly that D&D players would be better at navigating this than a Magic player in some weird ways. I think at least for this dungeon, it's probably the most straightforward and the easiest way to complete a dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And you get some value. Scry 1, create a treasure token, dart pool, and then or storeroom. So like there's different ways, and I think this is a good fast effect if you're trying to get to the end of a dungeon, and you get some benefits here or there. So I think this is kind of cool. And Lost Mine of Phandelver is like iconic, especially for 5th edition, because I believe it's the first module you can ever play or get introduced to as a player, and that has like a lot of people from D&D and the people who've made this this module in D&D, the game. I believe they say this is like the most robust game that you can play because it just has everything. Mm-hmm. And so for a new player, you're introduced to these concepts and are able to get the full kind of D&D experience just by playing this module. So I think it's great. I think it's good.
Okay. So I agree. I think that the venture mechanic is super interesting. I think that it will take some getting used to for a lot of people. I've heard criticism about the mechanic in that it feels a lot like there is an old card. I forgot what it's called, but it makes you start like a second game of Magic, the Gathering, when you play it. It's actually a real card. It's not an uncard. It makes you start a second game of Magic, and then whoever wins that game or whoever loses that game goes down a certain amount of life or something. And it seems like a mini game for a lot of people, and I can see that. I can see the Sherazad. Thank you, Reswitch. Yes, Sherazad. I can see that criticism, and I think I respect the criticism. I do think that this is it's getting close to a line for me, personally, that if it were to go much further in terms of like if this dungeon was like 6 more floors, or if this takes, if it gets much more complicated than the mechanics that are already in here, I think that this becomes something, or it reminds me of Plane Chase, or it reminds me of another mini game type of Magic. It reminds me of an Unset. It reminds me of something that doesn't really feel like it should be in a standard format. Almost like this set starting to feel like it should be something separate from Magic. But I don't think that they went too far. I think that they're just on the line. I think they did just fine. I have no criticisms for the design team. I think they did a wonderful job designing these dungeons. I think they're very cool. And I think that the cards so far that I've seen that venture into the dungeon that do this mechanic do it in a very fair way. I think that none of them are super broken. I would even argue maybe they're a little underpowered. I think that a dungeon takes a while to finish. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So you got Nadar enters the battlefield and then has to attack 3 times for you to finish a dungeon, which is quite a bit. Of course, there are other cards that'll help you, but you know what I mean. It does seem like a lot to get through a dungeon for not a huge payoff. You get +1/+1 to all your creatures, which you can already get on a 3-mana enchantment in white easily. So, I think, like I said, Lost Mines of Pandelver, like you said, is a great entry level dungeon, which they did a great job putting here on the card as well. And one of the cool things I like about this card is that your choices matter, just like in Dungeons and Dragons. Your choices have consequences. If you go down the right-hand path to the mine tunnels, you don't get the storeroom. You don't get to put a 1/1 counter on your creature. If you go down the left hand, then you don't get to give a creature -4, -0. So you have to make your decision. Maybe you didn't want a goblin token, but you did want the 1/1 counter. So you're going to miss out on the treasure token type thing. So, I kind of like that decision-making aspect that is very, very D&D. With that, none of these are maze. Did you notice that? None of these abilities are maze. You have to do them.
Yes.
So if Nadar is the only creature on the battlefield and you're in the right-hand tunnel, don't go to Fungi Cavern because you're going to end up giving your own Nadar -4, -0.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's actually really interesting. I didn't notice that these are not maze. And that's actually kind of cool because it also has the D&D flavor of like you enter this room, something happens, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because like you can't just like decline. Like you can't stop the adventure and be like, I'm not doing this. Like unless you talk with the DM, it's a moment that you need to discuss with your DM, which is totally fine. But in general, your decisions have consequences, and so that highlights this. And speaking into the game mechanic and how it feels like an unset or a separate mini game, I think the only way they had to do this was to toe the line, like on the knife's edge, and to get both the Magic flavor and the D&D flavor. And I think the only way they could have accomplished this for it to be successful and playable to a degree, and people want to play this, is to tiptoe the edge. I don't think there was any other way of like, either this gets played not at all, or this gets overly played and breaks the game of Magic. So I think design team really had to, go all out to really tweak this the right way.
Right. I totally agree. I think they did a really nice job designing the cards. I'm nervous about going into the future with it. I think they did an incredible job this time, and I believe in them to keep doing an incredible job. I'm such a cynic that I'm worried that something's going to happen. I'm going to be like, oh no, where's my game?
I think a lot like of how other D&D's or not Magic sets go. It's like, are you going to specifically go all in on dungeon mechanic? No. Are you gonna get good cards that so happen to have a venture mechanic? Yes. And I think that's probably what's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna be busted. I don't think it's gonna, change the game too much. I just think, at least like competitive wise, or even like if you're gonna slot these things into your deck, it's like, is this creature or effect or whatever or spell good enough on its own? It also has venture. Cool. I don't think it's like it has venture, I'm playing it.
Right. I totally agree. And you really need to kind of continue with your venture mechanics. If your Nadar gets killed halfway through your dungeon, you're never going to finish this thing if you don't have any other cards that do it. So you want to, if you're going to do a venture into the dungeon deck, you kind of got to build your deck around it. And like I said, the cards are not incredibly strong. They're cool and strong, but I don't think that they're incredibly strong. So, for example, Nadar, he's a good costed 3/3, but he still dies to Lightning Bolt. He still dies to a lot of things. He still dies to a Bugbear land. So, Nadar, he's cool, but you got to make sure you've got some other payoffs for your dungeon cards. Speaking of which, we're going to get into some other payoffs here for completing dungeons. With that, we've looked at Lost Mines of Pandelver. We've kind of seen what it can do. So the next time I bring up a venture card, we'll go into the next dungeon, and we'll look at that next one. If that sounds cool to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go use the rest of my get the next card going.
Sounds good. So chat, here is the alternate art for Nadar Selfless Paladin. I don't know what these are called. I think it's just called a variant at the moment, or I think it's just called a variant at the moment. It's they almost look like they're sketched out of wood. It's really, really interesting, and I like the way that they have encapsulated these pretty incredible characters and monsters in a very kind of old-timey feel. And of course, the card works exactly the same as it normally does. It just looks a bit different. So again, if this is not your kind of style, if you don't like this kind of art, you don't have to use this kind of art. If you open it and don't want to use it, I'm sure you could trade somebody for the original art if you like the previous art. So keep that in mind. If you're not a huge fan of the alt art, you can always, you don't have to use this alt art if you don't like it. But I think it looks really nice. This kind of old etching, almost wood type feel seems very cool to me. What do you think of the alt art for Nadar?
Oh, it's sick. Oh man, it's good. I think it's tiptoeing the line between modern artwork and things from old. There's like so much, like that transitioning and detail on the shield.
Yeah,
makes me think a little bit modern, but like all the armor pieces and sword, like that's on the character. I think that's the art style of old. So I think there's a lot to appreciate here, and I like the art. I like even though it's like a static brown, black and white picture, there's still movement there without color, because like it looks like he's in a battle stance, it looks like he's in a battle stance and he's like moving towards, or at least reacting to, some sort of threat. So I think it's really well done. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I think they did a really nice job with it. And one thing I've really liked about a lot of new Magic sets is the amount of variations they have on cards, so that each version of the card is different for different people, and it makes collecting the card very cheap, which is really nice for us Magic the Gathering players. If you just want the card, but you don't want the special art or the full art foil or the alternate art, if you just want the card, Nadar is going to be 25 cents in what I think. I think Nadar is going to end up being 25 cents. Nadar, like this version of Nadar is probably going to end up being like $1, $1.50. And then like if they make like another version of Nadar that's like full art foil, alternate art, then that one's probably going to end up being like $5. And that's really cool for Magic economy. I've noticed that a lot with the new sets. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think I agree. I actually didn't even think about that. There's different price ranges, and it kind of helps people from different economic backgrounds to kind of choose which or how much they want to price their life into Magic, because there's people who don't have a lot of money who just throw money at Magic. But I think that's interesting. I actually don't even know how to price these cards, because we're coming to a set rotation.
Mm-hmm.
It's after the set. Is that correct? That
we rotate? I don't know when the rotation. I don't keep track of standard.
I'll look at the rotation, but that also heavily depends. That also changes the prices a lot. If we rotate, and this is like one of the cards, the prices might be a little bit higher than we think. Yeah. If it doesn't, it might be a little bit lower. So
yeah, if the venture mechanic gets really strong, especially in white, then I think that Nadar is going to probably be more expensive than I imagine. Mm-hmm. But either way, even like some really good cards from the last sets have been pretty cheap with the amount that they've been printed. So we'll see how much they print this set. All right, Nadar. We're finished with you. We're finished the Lost Mines of Pandelver. Let's look at Cloister Gargoyle. Also 3 mana, just like Nadar. It is an artifact creature, Gargoyle. Uncommon from the set. 2 and a white. When Cloister Gargoyle enters the battlefield, venture into the dungeon. So same as Nadar. When it enters, you go into the next room of the dungeon, or you enter for the first time into a new dungeon. And then it says, as long as you've completed a dungeon, Cloister Gargoyle gets +3/+0 and has flying. So if you haven't completed a dungeon, it's a 0/4. If you have completed a dungeon, it's a 3/4 flyer for 3. Let's look at another dungeon. Let's look at Tomb of Annihilation. Tomb of Annihilation is similar to Lost Mines of Pandelver. It's a simple dungeon, one of the simpler of the 3. And I did look up, when you get to the last room of a dungeon and its ability has resolved, the dungeon is exiled.
Okay, cool.
It's gone. But
so
you can
it.
You can enter it again though. So you can start from the you know what I mean. But when you get to the last room, it's over. You don't have to venture out of the dungeon.
Cool. Good
so
to know.
First thing, if you have not entered a dungeon yet and you play Cloister Gargoyle, each player is going to lose 1 life when Cloister Gargoyle enters a battlefield.
Sick.
Pretty sweet. Then if you're already in trapped entry and then you play Cloister Gargoyle, then you get to choose to either go to Oubliette, which is discard a card and sacrifice an artifact, a creature, and a land, which I don't know. Or you can go down the left path, which is a little longer of a path. It's a little longer of a path, where each player loses 2 life unless they discard a card. So either you're in Oubliette or you're in Veils of Fear. And then you could play another Cloister Gargoyle, or you could play a Nadar, Selfless Paladin, or however you want to venture into the next room. And if you're in Oubliette, you go to the end. If you're not in Oubliette, if you're in Veils of Fear, you go down to Sandfall Cell. Each player loses 2 life unless they sacrifice an artifact, a creature, or a land. And then, of course, the last room is called Cradle of the Death God. It says, create the Atropal, a legendary 4/4 Black God horror creature token with Death Touch. What are we thinking about this dungeon?
I mean, this is my favorite dungeon. I'm a sacrifice player. I love all this kind of stuff. Oubliette is really interesting. I've been trying to ever since this thing was spoiled, I've been trying to think in my mind, how would I use this? And I think this dungeon's really, that side of the card is really good if you're ahead and you just want to make sure you can close the game out. So you don't mind discarding a card, sacrificing an artifact, creature in the land if you have those. I'm trying to think, are you allowed to do Oubliette if you can't meet its conditions? Say you don't have a creature to sacrifice or an artifact to sacrifice or a card to discard. You definitely will have a land, more than likely. So you'll sacrifice a land, but I wonder if I guess you still do it because it has to happen, and then you just don't have a target for an artifact, a creature, or you don't have a thing to discard. So I guess you can still do Oubliette, I would assume.
Yeah, I think it would be the same as if somebody casts Smallpox on you. Smallpox is black. It makes a player lose a life, discard a card, sack a land. So if you don't have a card to discard, you just don't. If you don't have a land to sack, you just don't. I think it's probably like that.
So I think at worst here, on average here, you're definitely sacking a land and maybe discarding a card. And sacrificing a creature.
Disclaimer that I could be wrong, though. I could be wrong. You may not be able to venture in here.
Wrong. Yeah, so I think, normally you're going to discard a card and sacrifice a land. But I think it's good because it's I need to rush through this dungeon to complete the dungeon. And this is the fastest, I think this is the fastest dungeon, right? If you
go through Oubliette,
trapped entry to Oubliette to Cradle of God. Yeah, so I think that's something to keep in mind. If you're playing sacrifice, you usually want to have a fast clock, and so you might not mind that. And then the other parts are, you start the game in incremental advantage of each player loses a life, each player loses 2 life unless they discard a card, each player loses 2 life unless they sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land.
It's a little longer, but less of a downside, I guess. It's a little longer of a path.
And Oubliette is only you, the player, and the other side is everyone. Right. Those 2 rooms, and then the last one is you get a 4/4 black horror creature token with Death Touch, which is nothing to scoff at in a sense. So this is I think this is a really interesting dungeon. I like it. I'm a Sacrifice player, and Tomb of Annihilation is really cool, so like it.
Yeah, I agree. I like it too. I think that it's cool to have a downside dungeon that lets you get through it quicker. Like you're rushing through it, so you're gonna trigger all the traps, and you're gonna, I like that idea of just like rushing through it. I've never played Tomb of Annihilation. I don't know if that's got a flavor to it for the dungeon itself. If you have to like give up your blood or something like that to get through it, I don't know. But it is very cool, and I think that this will definitely be the shortest dungeon to get through if you're trying to rush through and complete a bunch of dungeons for a reward. For example, with Cloister Gargoyle, your reward would be that it has +3/+0 in flying if you finished that dungeon already, or any dungeon. Let's look at the alt art for Cloister Gargoyle as well. Close. There we go. All right, so there is another one of these kind of sketch arts for Cloister Gargoyle. I think it looks really nice. It gives that old feel of like a monster manual from old-timey D&D from like the 80s. I think they did a nice job with it. I'm curious to know if they're going to do this for all the monsters, or if they've just picked ones that are like keystone monsters for certain mechanics. I'm not sure. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be key ones. I don't think they're going to do it for all of them. And then for Cloister Gargoyle, the card in general, I just don't know how to place it, because I feel like the best place it's going to be put into is like an Orzhov deck, because you have black for the sacrifice things and you go through Tomb of Annihilation, or it can maybe go into a Azorius deck for control, and you can kind of, you don't mind sacrificing a land because you're just making all your land drops because you're a filthy blue player and just drawing all the cards, so and you don't mind discarding a card. Like, so I think it's going to go into a white blue or white black kind of thing, and a 3/4 flying is pretty good for evasion. So
yeah, I agree. I think it's a good blocker early game. The thing
this
is,
might be Azorius. Yeah, this might be Azorius for sure.
It's definitely gonna see some kind of play if they are if you're going for a venture deck. Reswitch says we're not filthy. Andy makes a good point. Andy Insomnia in the chat says Oubliette is, I think, an okay option if you have, say, Korvold, which is sacrifice dragon that cares about when you sacrifice things, or a couple of Mayhem Devils out. Mayhem Devils also care about when you sacrifice. They deal damage, 1 damage to, I think, each opponent or target opponent when you sacrifice.
A really good point, because if you have Korvold out, you draw 4 cards. Like,
oh my God.
You lose 4 permanents on the battlefield, but you draw 4 cards. He becomes an 8/8 or
That's
a 9/9
crazy.
because you have to first sacrifice something when he comes out. So it's like you have a 9/9 Korvold and you drew 4 cards. That's not bad. And then Mayhem Devil, you get a burst of 4 damage, like at best. Like usually these are probably about 2 or 3 that are gonna happen, but oh no, it'd be 3 because it's you're discarding a card, so it would be 3. Sorry. So Korvold would be 8/8, and then Mayhem Devil gets to do 3 damage, but probably 2 for both of them. So 6/6 and 2 damage, which isn't like that's pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't put Cloister Gargoyle in there, but you can put one of the other cards we're going to see here into a Korvold deck. So there will be some cool stuff you can do with those sacrifice-themed decks. Speaking of which, let's continue forward into our venturing into the dungeons. We have Shortcut Seeker, a 3 and a blue common creature from the set. It's a human rogue. It's a 2/5 for 4 mana, so 2 attack, 5 health. And it says, whenever Shortcut Seeker deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. So a little bit less strong than something like Nadar that says whenever it attacks, it ventures. This one has to deal damage, combat damage to a player. So no wonder it's a common. I think this is really highly costed for a 2/5. I don't think that this card is going to see a lot of play. It's going to be good in limited. I think when you're swinging in with 2 of these and your opponent only has 1 blocker, or here or there or whatever, this thing's going to get you some rooms down your dungeon. It's got a nice amount of health. 5 health's pretty hard to deal with. So, there's that. But for the most part, this card's not going to see, I don't think, much of any play.
I wish there was a way to give it unblockable, like a way that you had to do that. Because it's like Shortcut Seeker, it's a rogue. I wish that there was a way to kind of, maybe it'll be a bit hard to complete, to have it be unblockable. But I feel like unblock. They probably toyed with it. R&D, I bet you toyed with like giving this unblockable.
I imagine so.
So, yeah, exactly. I share the sentiment, or I share the same analysis that Commander has. There's not much to say about this guy.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The flavor text is kind of funny. The old trapdoor under a rug trick. This is almost too easy, and you can see it in the art, which is kind of cool.
Art's good too. Really good art. Lighting effects. Man, like this is probably one of Magic's best lighting effects. Like for art sets, because I think they just got a whole bunch of D&D artists, because they usually have like, I feel like I think there are a few Magic artists or D&D artists that do both, but you're really seeing a lot of the D&D artists shine because these are so well detailed and the lighting is like really on point. So
yeah,
really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also agreed with your assessment that I think this card could have used some unblockable. Considering its name is Shortcut Seeker, it would make sense that it could get around creatures and be unblockable. Even if it was like 4 mana, or like 3 and a blue, make it unblockable. Like, that's still, I think, good enough for a common card, and it's a lot of mana to make it happen, but it's there, it's helpful. I think something like that could have been nice. But yeah.
Even another thing on flavor, if this creature and another creature are attacking, like this has unblockable.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because it's like the rogue thing of like, I get sneak attack damage or whatever.
Yeah, like they're distracting, I'm going to sneak around type thing or whatever. Yeah, I like that. So, Shortcut Seeker, not going to see a lot of play, but if you really need it, you throw it in your limited deck, that kind of thing. It's a 5 health creature, so it'll be seen in those kind of limited environments. All right. Next up, what happened to my music? That was weird. Okay. Next up, we have Dungeon Crawler. 1 black mana for an uncommon creature zombie. Dungeon Crawler enters the battlefield tapped. It says, whenever you complete a dungeon, you may return Dungeon Crawler from your graveyard to your hand. It's a 2/1. Flavor text. I think of it as giving them another chance to achieve their potential. From Nestus Ras, Necromancer.
Yes. Man, this is a beautiful card. Lighting still on point. Even details of skulls that look like brick pieces, also really good.
Oh, that's cool. I never noticed that. That's awesome. Yeah, look at those skulls up there. Those are super cool.
I don't know how this is going to perform as a card.
This card's bad.
It's not good.
If it went back into play, it'd be a little better.
Yeah, if it went into play, see, I feel like that because like I don't know how easy it's going to be to finish dungeons, but yeah, I feel like if it went to play, it would be a lot better than to your hand. I mean, I guess it is only 1 mana, but that's still 1 mana. So,
and I mean, I guess it's a 1 mana 2/1, which is really it's nice stats, I guess. For a card, it does enter tapped. I don't see how this is uncommon necessarily. I think this is a common feel to me. If it went back into play, I think it'd be much better, like we said. But I don't think you're gonna see a lot of Dungeon Crawler.
It could even still be a common and it come into play, like honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. I don't think you're gonna see a lot of Dungeon Crawler. All right. Awesome art, by the way, Svetlin Velinov. I think this is the second one that we've seen from you today. Thank you. Awesome art. All right, Gloom Stalker. We've got a lot of these 3 mana dungeon white cards. Gloom Stalker, 2 and a white. Creature Dwarf Ranger. Common from the set. As long as you've completed a dungeon, Gloom Stalker has double strike. And it's a 2/3. Flavor text. I'll make sure you never mistake a roper for a stalagmite again.
Good. This is a 2/3, 3 mana. Like this is what this is a basic white card. Also, again, we have a lot of. It seems like white is a lot of complete a dungeon, get this combat effect, and so I don't know. It could be. This could actually be good. Depends on like how it. I don't know how priced white is into just like venture during combat stuff, get combat affecting. It could be good. Like it could be good. They could do Lost Mine of Fandelver. They can get 1/1 like 1/1 goblins or give their creatures +1/+1. Like white might be a good like color to do Lost Mine of Phandelver and get the effects that they're looking for. We just don't know looking at all the cards yet. But it's kind of giving, as we keep seeing cards, it's kind of giving more, I guess, consideration into that.
Yeah, looking at the dungeons so far, the ones we've seen, Tomb of Annihilation and Lost Mines, I think Lost Mines is the better of the options for a white deck trying to go in and complete dungeons. You get a lot of benefits for going through that. With that, before we get into our last AFR card for the day, we're going to look at a secret lair after that. But our last AFR card after Gloom Stalker here is the Planeswalker from the set. We should, I think, look at the last dungeon, which is, I think, the most complicated one. So, but it also has, I think, the most payoff. So that was Tomb of Annihilation. Let's look at Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
Oh, yeah.
Whew, that's a lot of text on a card, Michael.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of text and a lot of choices.
I mean, usually when things have a lot of text, it means that they're probably going to be kind of good.
Yeah. Okay, so your Nadar just entered the battlefield. So your Selfless Paladin just entered the battlefield, your Dragon Knight, and the first thing it does is it gains you life. Nice. Yawning Portal. First room. You gain a life when Nadar enters. Cool. You attack next turn. You scry one with Nadar. Okay? You attack again. Now you've got a choice. From scrying one in the dungeon level, you choose Goblin Bazaar or Twisted Caverns. No matter what, you're going to the same room, though, after that, which is something to keep in mind. So, in this case, your choices are not quite as permanent as in Lost Mines of Phandelver. These choices are one-time choices, and then you still go to the same room as everybody else. So, in this case, you're either going to make a treasure token, or you're going to go to the Twisted Caverns, and it says target creature can't attack until your next turn. So it's kind of a bit of a control room. Keeps opponent from being able to attack with a creature. Or you could choose one of yours. Again, it's a May, so be careful. If you're the only one with creatures out, don't go to Twisted Caverns. You don't want to do that, because then you're going to lock up your own creature. Next, you go to Lost Level, which is Scry 2. So you scried 1 in Dungeon Level. Now you're going to Scry 2 in Lost Level. And then you got another choice to make. This is your last choice for the dungeon. You're either going to go to Runestone Caverns, which is exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play them. Or you can go to Mural's Graveyard, which is create 2 1/1 black skeleton creature tokens. That's all for you in your sacrifice deck. That's not too bad.
It's all right. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
So, Runestone Caverns, keep in mind, when you exile the top 2 cards of your library, you may play them. That's forever. You can play them. That ability lasts. It doesn't say until the end of turn you can play them. That ability lasts forever. So that's a pretty cool ability. It doesn't say you can play them for free, though. You still got to pay for them. So you still got to pay the mana and all that good jazz. It also lets you play lands, which is cool.
You could just put 2 lands and just be like, I'm going to definitely make my land drop.
Yep. So Runestone Caverns is pretty cool there. Deep Mines is the next room, Scry 3. So when you scry, just in case you guys didn't know, you look at the top card of your library and decide whether to put it on the top or the bottom of your library. So you kind of decide your own fate a little bit. In this case, you'd pick up your top 3 and then decide how to put them back on top or to throw some on the bottom if you don't like them or something like that. And then the last room, this is insane. Mad Wizard's Lair. Draw 3 cards and reveal them. Show them to your opponents. You may cast one of them without paying its mana cost. What do you think?
I mean, this is a control player's dream. This is a control player's, dream dungeon. Has or dream mechanics. You're probably playing stuff that does venture, that is good on it. Like the card's good on itself and just happens to have venture, so you get to do dungeon and Mad Mage, and so you're getting all this value for just doing what you would do anyway. In some ways, I feel like this could be one of the more powerful ones out of all of them, because there's so much value you get going through all of this. To highlight a specific thing before I keep going into it, play and cast are 2 different things in Magic, which I've only just learned like a month ago because I just didn't think of it. I just thought they were interchangeable, but they're not. Cast means like you can actually pay the cost of the card and do the spell thing.
It has to be a spell.
It has to be a spell. And then play is like for your lands or a spell. So that's something to keep in mind. That's why we're like, oh, lands, like that's a huge deal, because lots of things that let you exile things is usually just cast, not play. but I think there's incremental value you get as a control player. Everything this card has is what you want. So like, create a treasure token. You can ramp. You know, if you're missing your land drops, which is important when you're control. You never want to miss a land drop or like miss mana. Or there's Twisted Caverns. Like you can stop one of your players from or opponent from their creature attacking. Also, interestingly enough, when you say that you have to do this, like if you are controlling the board and you have a huge creature and your opponent can't block their stuff and they can't kill your creature because it's like do 3 damage to target creature and your creature's like a 5/5, but they have like a 2/2 creature that isn't doing anything, they could smoke their own creature and then this thing would take effect and then like your thing isn't attacking, which is like some interesting like,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they could like sacrifice their own creature and make
it's
you
a cheeky
interesting.
It'd be a cheeky move.
Yeah, so there's without getting too much into the stack, this ability does use the stack. So going into that dungeon room, target creature can't attack until your next turn. That ability goes on the stack, or the ability to venture goes in the stack. And I think what's interesting here, Michael, is I think you've got to pick before. So I think, let me back up for a second. If you want to smoke your own creature, I think you've got to do it before they pick the room. Because once they've picked the room and targeted your creature, it's not going to be as cool as you thought it was. Because the target's already happened. You know what I mean?
It's like extinction event. Like before they name even or odds, you have to do. Okay, so never mind. Anyway, that was interesting. And then here a couple things. You get to make the 1/1 black skeleton creature tokens. I mean, those are good blockers. And then you can have the Runestone Caverns get some lands or a spell. And then the last one, Mad Wizard's Lair. It's like Emergent Ultimatum Light, which if you folks don't know, Emergent Ultimatum's a magic card from Ikoria that's like 7 mana. Get 3 cards from your library. Your opponent chooses one that they don't want you to cast. You put that into your library and shuffle, and then you get to cast 2 spells for free. Well, anytime you can cast a free card is usually broken. And if you're playing control and you get to draw 3 cards and reveal them, and you get to choose, like sometimes that'll just be like 3 lands and you can't cast it, you can't do anything. But
yeah, once in a while Mad Wizard's Lair is going to screw you over and not give you anything good.
Yeah, but if you're jamming your cards in the right way and you're scrying, to actually keep in mind you are actually scrying. So like you can stack, there's a little bit of I can stack 3 cards and have a chance of like 6 cards, right, to cast something that's going to be awesome. So something to be aware of, and I think this is the most value dungeon that there is.
Yeah, definitely the longest dungeon, but definitely the highest payoff of all the dungeons. And if you've built your deck around venturing, if you've built your deck in a way that lets you venture very quickly, this could be something that you finish in a couple turns. If you've got 2 things out that venture every turn, that this thing can get done pretty quickly. Speaking of which, let's go into the last venture card for the day. Our Planeswalker from the set, who lets you venture every turn you want, as long as she's alive. This is Eliwick Tumblestrum. 2 green mythic Planeswalker from the set. She's a legendary Planeswalker Eliwick. She's an original character from Magic the Gathering. She is not from Dungeons and Dragons lore. So this creature was, or this character was made for this set, and is not part of the original D&D lore from Forgotten Realms.
That's cool.
But she comes in with 4 loyalty abilities. Down here in the bottom right, you can see my mouse. For those of you that are vision impaired, when a Planeswalker comes in, it has loyalty counters on it, and that's kind of like their health points. And so in this case, Eliwick has 4 health points when she comes in, and she has an ability that's a +1 ability, so she can add 1 health point, so she goes up to 5, and it says venture into the dungeon. So it straight up sends you to the next part of your dungeon or ventures you into a dungeon as her +1 ability, which is pretty cool. I think I'm going to wait for Michael to come back. He just went somewhere. So I think I'm going to wait for Michael to come back before I read the other abilities, because they're pretty long. And I'm not sure if he's seen the card yet. So I'm going to wait. But I think it's cool that there's a Planeswalker that can consistently bring you further into a dungeon, kind of like guiding you through. I think that's pretty cool. What do you guys think in the chat? Hey, welcome back.
Hey, just using the bathroom.
Oh, yeah,
If
you're
know
good.
Me, that's what I do all the time.
No, you're good. So we just went over the +1, which is venturing into the dungeon. -2 on Eliwick, so you can subtract 2 of her loyalty counters, her health points, if you will. You can subtract 2, and you can look at the top 6 cards of your library, and you may reveal a creature card from among them and put it in your hand. If it's legendary, you gain 3 life. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order, the bottom of your library in a random order. So her -2 ability lets you look at the top 6 cards of your library, pick a creature from among them, and put it in your hand. And if it's legendary, you get an extra 3 life, which is kind of nice. And then her ultimate ability, her -7 ability, if you're able to uptick her and venture further into the dungeon and really get her health points up pretty high, you can -7, so subtract 7 off of her loyalty counters, and you get an emblem, and we'll talk about what an emblem is in a second, with creatures you control have trample and haste, which is already really strong,
Ooh.
and get +2 for each differently named dungeon you've completed. So, an emblem is somewhat like an enchantment in that it is a static ability on the field that affects your board, but emblems can't be interacted with. You can't remove a player's emblem, you can't target a player's emblem, you can't get rid of a player's emblem. There's only one card in the entire game that can, quote-unquote, get rid of an emblem, and it's a Planeswalker from an old set that restarts the game with his ultimate ability. If you restart the game, emblems go away. But that's the only way to get rid of an emblem. So, for all intents and purposes, there's no way to get rid of this emblem once it comes out. It stays on forever. And it gives your creatures trample and haste, which is very strong. Trample means if their attack is higher than the health of a defending creature, the extra damage goes over to your opponent's face. And then the creatures have haste, which means they can always attack and use their tap abilities when they come into play. So that's already strong. But then you also get +2/+2 on all your creatures, +2 attack, +2 health, for each differently named dungeon you've completed, which in total could be +6/+6 maximum in this set. There's only 3 dungeons. So +6/+6 is huge, though. Can you imagine getting this Planeswalker out, being able to ult it? I mean, at that point, you're probably already winning the game, though, if you've completed 3 dungeons. I think that would be like a commander dream, like, to get the 3 dungeons completed. But for the most part, I think Eliwick's an interesting card, and the abilities are wide and ranging in what they can do, especially I think the -2 is really interesting. So what do you think of Eliwick for her mana cost, her health, her abilities? What do you think?
It's a good. I think it's a good Planeswalker. I think the design team did good in the sense of it's not too busted. It's also not going to not see play, so it'll see some play, I think. And then I also think the -2 is really good. I think this card does well in Bant colors, and Bant being white, blue, and green, or any combination of there. So it's white, green, because you can get creatures and gain life if they have legendary, or Simic. You have green and blue, and so you can kind of counter things, but also keep your life up, and then make it hard on your opponent to really punch through all the things and venture through into the dungeon, so you can drag the game out longer since you're Simic. And then Bant, obviously, it's like control, so you can just have it all in a sense, if you can make that work. So I think Eliwick Tumblestrum's interesting, and I like how it's a Planeswalker that is specifically designed for this set. And it does make venture maybe a little bit more attainable.
Right.
If you can defend. One thing, though, with commanders is something that you always want to keep in, or not commanders, Planeswalkers that you want to keep in mind is can they protect themselves? Because they're a high value target for your opponent to hit, because Planeswalkers, if you let them stay, they just accrue you so much value and advantage, you just can't stay. So
agreed.
It doesn't actually, it could protect itself if you ventured and then you picked one of the ones that allow you to make a creature. Then
2 skeletons.
Or the make a goblin, right?
Yep.
In Lost Mana Fandelver. So it could pseudo protect itself if you've at least ventured once, and you might have, because this comes down probably on turn 4 or turn 3. So it could be good in that sense. We don't know, because we haven't seen all the rest of the cards. So I think this is a B. Like I give it a B, like a
Yeah.
B, a B out of for a grade scale for a planeswalker. I think it's decent. I like the art. You mentioned that it's only kind of like a Magic but D&D exclusive in both senses because it didn't exist before any of this. So I like the art. I like the frog. It's a bard. I think it's an elf too. And then you see like a card there, which also indicates like, oh, this is a MTG plane. Sorry, a D&D planeswalker. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would give this card a similar rating of like a B or something. We haven't been rating all the cards, but this card's strongest suit is that it's consistently venturing you into the dungeon. If you've got protection for it, this card will get you through dungeons very quickly, especially if you have something like Nadar or one of the Cloister Gargoyles or something else that ventures you into the dungeon. This then gives you that opportunity to venture twice in a turn, venture 3 times in a turn, which is very strong if you can do that. So Eliwick's got some potential. It'll depend on how much more support they have for the venture mechanic and whether or not it's in green. So I think Eliwick's cool. I'm going to throw her into my new Karth the Lion deck. He's from the previous set. He cares about planeswalkers. Yeah, and just, being able to venture in the dungeon is not going to be a big part of that deck, but it'll be cool to have it. So, yeah.
I did get Karth, so that's actually interesting that you mentioned that. That might also be a move just to see if I can get through a dungeon. And there's definitely for Karth, there's a different amount of flavors you can play Karth, so that you could definitely probably lend itself to adventure in some case or form. So
absolutely,
yeah, I like that. That's cool.
And then she's got an alt art here as well. This is going to be one of the full arts that you can find. Very beautiful, wonderful little fairy, couple fairies. They got the frog there too still. I really like this art. I think it shows a lot about the character and what they're all about. And the card's still there. It's actually on the end of their instrument.
Yeah, it's like a pick holder thingy, which is really cool. This art is so good. It has everything. You have like a little owl. It looks like there's an owl being covered by the name, the top left. You have fairies, so it's like very elf-esque. You're in the forest. You have all these. It just combines everything that you love about D&D, and then still lends itself to Magic. It's almost like a perfect art card. It's just so good. It's really good.
And something that I would like to point out that I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really often see diversity in fairies. I think it's really cool that there's 2 black fairies here.
True. That's cool. That's awesome. I like that. Yeah. That's something that we're all trying to work on. And like, I think it's cool that the fairies are there having a good time. And we're seeing some representation there, and D&D is working. There's lots of people in D&D community that are working to push diversity out there. And so seeing maybe some of that in as a nod in a card is kind of nice. So this is a cool card.
Awesome. All right, so that's our Adventures in the Forgotten Realms spoilers for the last few weeks. Now, I have 6 cards to show you from the Saturday morning Dungeons & Dragons Secret Lair. Now, Michael, I know you're not super familiar with the show. Have you ever watched it?
No, I've only heard people talk about it, like referencing it and all those other things. So, I don't know, and I didn't look at the cards too much, so you can probably see my live reactions. And I think you're probably the one to talk about this. So I'm excited.
So I'll explain them to you, and then you let me know how do you think they did in kind of representing the things after I explain them to you. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, so we're gonna start with Commander's Sphere. Commander's Sphere is a commander-only card, and on the art here, we have the Dungeon Master from the show. So I should probably explain the show a little bit. The D&D cartoon, Dungeons & Dragons, is a cartoon that was announced in 1983, premiered in 1983, and ran to 1985, so only for a couple years. I think it had 26, 27 episodes, so it wasn't super long. It was a Saturday morning, 20-minute cartoon, and the premise of the show is a group of kids get on a roller coaster, and that roller coaster takes them, into a big tunnel, which then transports them into the Dungeons & Dragons world. It's like a nightmare almost. It's actually, as far as I remember, it's kind of like Samurai Jack. If you've ever seen the show Samurai Jack or heard of it, it's about a samurai who gets sent forward in time and has to get back to his past. And in this case, it's about a bunch of kids who get sent into a Dungeons & Dragons world, and they have to get home to the real world, back to the carnival where they were at. and so they have to get guided by this guy, the dungeon master. He gives them their weapons and gives them these cryptic riddles and things to try and guide them through their adventures. And they have a big bad that they have to stop, just like a regular D&D story. Similar to Samurai Jack as well, the show was canceled before the kids ever made it home. The show was canceled before the adventure ever finished. There was a epilogue that was made, an audio-only epilogue with the actors, where they played out the end of the story, and the kids did eventually make it home, but they never actually premiered it, like premiered the episode, or they never animated it, so it wasn't officially finished. It was a campy, cheesy 80s cartoon, kind of in the same vein of like a mixture of Magic School Bus and He-Man at the same time. Like it kind of had like a mix of that. So it was very campy. It was very fun. And this card here, Commander Sphere, is aptly named, having the commander of the kids, the dungeon master, the leader of these kids from the show, depicted on the art. He is like a benevolent mentor, so he's a good guy. He provides cryptic riddles and helps them solve their adventures and encourages them to work together to overcome their shortcomings, because a lot of the kids do have shortcomings being kids. And he gives them their special weapons and stuff that we'll see on the next cards. So he is a good guy, and I think the art here does a good job kind of depicting him as the leader. It's got all the colors of magic on it, which I really like. It's got, well, kind of, I guess. Yeah, so it doesn't have green, I guess. But to me, it does have like the black or purple kind of swamp, the blue water, the for island, blue. You've got white plains, red mountain. Yeah, I guess I don't really see any green, but I kind of like the way that they went about the art here. This is how he's depicted in the show, and it's even got some flavor text here. The fate of one is shared by all. So if one of the kids doesn't make it home, they all can't make it home. They have to do it together, which is kind of a big piece of the show, is teamwork and that kind of thing. So what do you think? Do you think they did an all right job depicting?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've seen some stuff and about it, like I said, and I think they did a good job about depicting this. Maybe there's no green because green ramps on its own and can filter colors, so no green needed.
no green deck's ever gonna run Commander Sphere. You're right.
Yeah. So I do like how they have the Commander Sphere art. Like the sphere that he's holding is what Commander Sphere looks like when you see depictions of it in Magic. And then you're seeing like the combination of Magic and D&D, where you see this old D&D character from the show holding an actual Commander Sphere. And so I think that's cool. And they're showing him to be larger than life because it looks like behind him is space, and then like there's these energy currents going up, and it looks like he's towering over the earth with like sky underneath him. And we've seen art like this. I think there's like an island, I forget which set it is, but there's like a digital looking grid, and then there's like clouds, and there's like water, and so it kind of has some of that art feel where you have I don't know if you call it a forced perspective, but you have a different perspective of it being bigger. So I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they did an awesome job. I like the mixture of the Saturday morning cartoon with the Magic the Gathering artifact, the Commander Sphere being in there with it. I think that's a really cool idea, and I totally agree. I think they did a good job here, and they even give him his kind of mischievous look, because he is a bit cryptic and weird, which I think is nice. Our next card is Whir of Invention here. Whir of Invention is X blue for a instant speed card. It's an old card with the ability Improvise on it. It says search your library for an artifact card with convert a mana cost X or less and put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it's a tutor card that you pay mana into. You can tap your artifacts to pay extra mana. That's what Improvise is. So if you have an artifact, you can tap it for a colorless mana to help pay for the spell. And you search your library for a artifact that has converting mana costs X or less. So if you put X is 3 into Whir of Invention, you do 3 generic mana, and then you put in your 3 blue mana, you can go find a 3 or less artifact from your deck, like a Commander Sphere, and shove it into play, which is nice. Putting things into play is very strong, and it's an instant, so you can do it on someone else's turn, surprise them, that kind of thing. There is a flavor text here. It says, Magic Hat, I'm going to be frank. What we need now is a 20-ton tank. And to give you an idea of what that is, this is Presto the Magician being depicted on the card here. Presto is one of the kids who has a magical hat that he uses to bring out items that the group might need. So his hat is kind of like a bag of holding. And he pulls things out, but he's really bad at controlling it. So he often pulls out the wrong things. Like he pulls out something that they don't need. And he's like constantly digging through it, looking for things. He almost never has the right item. But when he pulls through with the perfect item in the show. Every once in a while, they really need him to come through, and he pulls out something perfect from the hat. So I think that the card art did a great job depicting that. There's so much rubble and just random items. You got a chicken, you got a fly, you got a bucket. He's been pulling out dynamite there in the back, a trumpet, bananas. He's been pulling out everything but what they need, and it kind of shows you this whir of invention is that moment in the show where he gets the perfect item. He goes and searches for that perfect thing. So what do you think?
A lot of flavor now that you explain what improvise does, because you're using artifacts to pay to get the perfect artifact. So and in there you see like things that you can consider to be artifacts in the background, like a bucket, a trumpet. I guess a chicken to some extent could be an artifact if you did it right. Food, which is the banana. So I like it. I like the flavor. I like how it brought Presto's character into life, and I like how they implemented a Saturday morning cartoon onto a Magic card. I think it had no choice but to be a full art to capture the whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really good. It almost feels like if you looked at it long enough, it would like actually start to be the cartoon, and you'll see like you could watch a cartoon on your Magic card. So I like it. It's good. Yeah,
I agree. I think what I like about these secret layers is they're very optional. The reprints, especially in this secret layer, are not super like sought after. They're good cards, but they're not something that like everyone needs. So no one's gonna have to buy this to try and get the card that they need at a cheaper price. This is literally just for people who really enjoyed the show or have never seen it and want to have this kind of novelty item. That's kind of what it's there for. And I think that's what secret layers should be, in my opinion, is an item for people to collect and not really an item that people need to get, or else they'll be behind, or something like that. So. I think they did a nice job with the flavor here. I think the cartoon looks really nicely drawn. And speaking of which, let's go to the next card here, which is Impact Tremors, one of my favorite cards in Magic, great commander card. And this is a 1 and a red enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremors deals 1 damage to each opponent. So whenever a creature enters, you're dealing damage to your opponents, which is good. And the flavor text here, the only chance we have of getting out of this world is if we take care of Venger once and for all. And we have characters depicted here. I'll read them off left to right for you. So from the left, far left, we got Hank the Ranger. He's like the level-headed leader of the group. His arrows are pretty cool. He has a grappling arrow, hurdy arrows. He has one that's like light up an area, or he can bind people with them. And so his arrows are kind of malleable and cool in that way. You got Bobby the Barbarian there in the middle, who's smashing the ground with his club, and his club causes earthquakes. That's from the show, so you can see it lighting up there and causing earthquakes. And then Sheila the Thief, she's on the far right. She's the older sister of Bobby, and she has a magical invisibility cloak, which you can kind of see being activated there as well. So the three of them are often found together because they are kind of the closest to each other, and Hank, the leader, doesn't like to let Bobby out of his sight because Bobby is rambunctious and very will get himself into trouble. Same with Sheila, who she doesn't want to be alone. That's like her biggest fear, is being alone. So she'll often put on the invisibility cloak and stay with the group as best she can, so that she doesn't get caught, because she's kind of a scaredy cat. But she's very helpful, and she's like the thief, the rogue of the group. So she does a lot of the sneaking around and investigating. But in this art, we have Bobby smashing the ground with his club, causing rocks to fly everywhere, creating tremors on the ground. What do you think of this, being someone who's never seen the show?
Yeah, I've never seen the show, but it tells a lot about the story, and like those things that you explain are kind of communicated, because you don't. From the things we've seen so far, at least with Presto, like he's kind of by himself, but these three seem like they have a connection together and they're working together. They seem to know that Bobby like everything you said is described here. They seem to know that Bobby's mallet or hammer, or sorry, club makes earthquakes because they're not like frightened of it, and they're all in action stances or movement. So I think it's cool. And then Impact Tremors is a good card, and you can tell that this card is kind of detailing what Impact Tremors is about. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremors deals 1 to each damage to each opponent. So, if you make a bunch of tokens, that's fun, and you get to do a lot of damage. And I think this is, and you see the rocks coming down too, which is a cool effect. I like it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they did a great job bringing what Impact Tremors is into the art. They could have done a lot of things. They could have done Earthquake. They could have done a lot of things for this card. I like Impact Tremors, though. It's a good card that I think is a bit underrated. So it's kind of like mini Perforos if you're a God fan, MTG God fan. All right, next up here, we have Unbreakable Formation, which is a white instant, 2 and a white. And it says creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So creatures you control can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects. And it has an ability that was printed, I believe, in Guilds of Ravnica called Addendum. If you cast this spell during your main phase, put a 1/1 counter on each of those creatures, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. So if you cast this during your turn, instead of responding to somebody destroying all your creatures, you cast it on your turn preemptively. You get all your creatures get a 1/1 counter on them, and they get vigilance, which means they don't tap until end of turn when they attack. So you can kind of prep that attack step. On the card here, it shows Diana the Acrobat. Her name's Diana. She has a special staff that she can break into pieces, and she can spin around and use to block projectiles and things. She is actually in real life an Olympic athlete, which is super cool, and she's the kind of co-leader with Hank. So when Hank is either knocked out or captured or gone for some reason, she's the stand-in leader, and she's very level-headed and cool. And then behind her is Eric the Cavalier, who's kind of like a paladin. He's basically a paladin. He's got a magical shield that can blind people, and for the most part, he's like the coward of the group. He's the scaredy cat of the group. He ends up playing a lot of big roles at the end of the show in their fights against the big bad evil guy who we're going to see next. He shows off his bravery in moments where it comes to protecting his friends and things like that. But in a moment like this where he's the one being attacked, you can see him cowering in the back and Diana stepping in to block a projectile. So I like hearing your takes on this. What do you think?
I think it's great. I like seeing Diana in a powerful position, and knowing that this is an Olympian in real life and all that stuff is just lends to the way more cool factor about it. There's so much movement happening in this card. I don't think, even though the art's simple and it seems like all the D&D stuff, there's so much movement happening, which when you look at other D&D cards, Magic the Gathering cards, you see movement being depicted, but it always feels static, like you're taking a picture of a scene, you just
like wings coming out, or
it usually doesn't. There's very few cards I think that I've seen. I haven't been playing Magic forever, but it always feels like snapshots. It never feels like there's something for your eye to follow. Like here, your eye wants to follow the projectile hitting the spinning staff and then away from it, and then you look towards the other characters in the scene. So I think not just with this, but all the D&D set, there's dynamic aspects happening, and
I agree.
I think I like this. You see, and it lends the flavor, like this Unbreakable Formation, the art for this art lends to the flavor of, if you play this in response to your opponent doing something, it's like Diana spinning the sphere, and then the addendum is if it was his name Hank or something.
This one is
the paladin. Anyway,
yeah,
the paladin,
Eric. Sorry.
Eric. So Eric, if you do this during your main phase, maybe Eric has gotten his bravery, and so now he's an added person to the fight, and and all that vigilance and stuff. So I think it's cool. I think you get both sides. This is great. So many levels is really good. They've been doing good on this and knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've done a great job making the cards make sense and also giving the flavor of the show and bringing the show to people who maybe have not seen it before. I think it would be nice for them on the page for the Secret Lair to give a little explanation for each of these cards to help people like I'm kind of doing for you right now, because I would imagine most people looking at the cards don't know what's going on. They don't know the characters, and so they don't feel quite as, enamored with them as they might be if they knew more. But that said, I think they've done a really great job with the art.
Yeah, they should do a website page on it, like you're saying. Yeah.
All right, 2 more cards. Hero's Downfall.
Yes.
So this shows the whole group from the show being trapped by Venger, the BBEG of the show, the big bad evil guy of the show. He's an evil wizard who was once good and is now corrupted with power, trying to kill Tiamat, who is another card from D&D, another character from big D&D, trying to kill Tiamat and take over the realm from her. So he's depicted in the back, capturing them into a sphere and putting them onto what seems like a pedestal to trap them forever. What are your thoughts?
I like it. Got the big, red, bold colors to show like evil. You get the black there, and then the discolored skin. So it's like, and the horns. It's just very. It's buying into fully like the whole evil tropes. This
guy's bad.
Yeah, this guy is a bad guy, kids. This is what bad guys look like. So I like that. And then them being put in a sphere and like look like they're being put into like either a pedestal or a cauldron. Really cool. And then I like this is the end ... for all of you. Like it's a very villainy way of like how they go in long, draggy kind of dialogues. And
fun fact I didn't mention before, the artist for all these cards is the same artist from the show, obviously, as well, if you didn't know. So yeah, very cool. I think his name's Tyler Wapple, something like that. Did the original art for the show and came back to make these cards. So a lot of love you can see is put into them. These are not stills from the show. These are specifically made for Magic.
And I think to describe something I've been seeing with this D&D, with the D&D set before and this set, when you see the old art stuff, you see a lot of the bold old art like colors and lines, but you see the modern lighting effects, and that's also happening here, where you can really tell like the light is good, because like with old art, like you usually see like that weird darkening and coloring of things that are animated, but here it's like crisp and clean, and you can tell the light source is kind of coming from the sphere as it's illuminating the guy's face and the hands, and then there's shadows all throughout the card. So I think you're seeing the artists of old, but implementing new lighting styles, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think with this card and the next card, while I don't think that the art necessarily depicts what the card does, like I don't think this necessarily destroys a creature. I feel like what he's kind of doing is capturing them in a sphere, and like this could have been, I think there's literally called a blue card called like Capture Sphere that would be kind of perfect for maybe this art. While I don't think the flavor is perfect, I don't think it really needs to be. The card is cool, and I think that I think black is the perfect color for a card showcasing Venger, the big bad guy. So I don't think blue would have worked quite as well. Plus, I think they wanted one card for each color, which is kind of the point. They definitely wanted to do one for each color, but we'll see in the next card too. I'm not sure how the next card's art fits into what the card does, but maybe you can give me some insight as I describe to you what's going on. It's the last card. This is Primal Vigor. And it shows here Warduke, who is a character that showed up for like a couple episodes in the show. Warduke is a bounty hunter barbarian that was hired by the big bad Venger to kidnap the dungeon master. That was his goal, is to kidnap the dungeon master and take over the realm. And he fails at it miserably and ends up running away and fleeing with his frog monsters. And he's never seen again after the 2 episodes that he's on. So he is a kind of small character. Those frog monsters, he's not chasing them. They are his like allies. He's running with them away from the cave that he failed to kidnap. Either that or they're running towards the cave. I think they look a little bit more like they're running towards it, maybe. Like he seems like he's charging with them. But I'm not really sure how this works with Primal Vigor's ability, which is it's 4 and a green enchantment. If 1 or more tokens would be created, twice that many tokens are created instead. Maybe that works with the frog monsters. He's like creating frog monster tokens. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a creature, twice that many 1/1 counters are put on that creature instead. So this works for everybody. This enchantment is a global enchantment. It works for anyone. So if anyone makes tokens, they all make tokens. If anyone puts 1/1 counters, you know, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think I have, you know, one great descriptor for all of this, and it just works perfectly. It's like the perfect D&D Chad card. Like, what did you say his name was? Like Duke? What was it? Duke. War Duke. I mean, so Chad. Like, this is like, you know, you have a friend who like is into sports and like seeing D&D is kind of interested, and they want to make their first character. They make War Duke. Like, easily they make War Duke.
So
like,
true.
oh, I should play into this fantasy trope. I guess I'll have some frog minions or something. It's like, come on, man. But I love it. It still has the D&D flavor of like, you know, you have War Duke, you know, War Chad up in here, and
War Chad.
And so, but Primal Vigor is an awesome card. Love this. It's cool, and I like to see like you have your token creatures, kind of like the frogs here, and you explain the lore. Super cool. And same thing with the movement, right? Like we're seeing something that doesn't feel dynamic. You feel like Warduke is actually making his horse, you know, kick up, and these frogs are coming at you. I really like that. It's good, and the art is solid. And Primal Vigor, and this is a good for Commander. This is a good what do they call this, group hug mechanic. Like everyone's gonna be like happy that you play Primal Vigor to an extent, but you know that you're gonna be pumping out more creatures and more tokens and more +1/+1 counters than everyone else. But everyone's gonna be like, sweet, like Primal Vigor, and then it's gonna get the whole table excited, and they're gonna like, let me check out that art card, because it's the effect is happening everyone, and so people will get more invested in that. So I think this is going to be cool to see, especially in commander games. I think I'm definitely gonna, if someone has it, I'm like, let me see that, because that card looks cool. So
yeah, absolutely. I think they did a great job encompassing the show and bringing the love and the silliness of the show and bring it all together. I'm glad I got to share it with you as something that meant a lot to me when I was a kid. I'm glad I got to share a little bit of the information for you about the show. I wish that they would pick it up for the last season so that they could finish it off, because it was a really fun little story that's great for teaching kids all about being brave and standing up to bullies, and you know, those classic 80s cartoons tropes that I think really you know, they were healthy. They weren't like it was never man up. You know, there's never like a man up kind of message. There's never like a toxic masculinity or like a girls can't do what guys can do. There's none of that. It's very empowering show for the time period. So I have a lot of love for it, and I'm glad they're giving it some love in my favorite game too.
But Commander, you know, D&D was the original safe space. I've not been seeing that happening on Twitter, that dialogue, but
oh no.
But no, this show, for what you're saying, and I believe you, like, this show does seem to be a little bit more, you know, probably pretty progressive for the time of having the characters that they had, and you know, just kind of how this show like explains like power through friendship and having somewhat like you know, different people, types of people in the show. So I like it.
Yeah, and funny little I guess information for how the show ends up ending. It's kind of interesting. It's the dungeon master shows the kids that he could have sent them home whenever he wanted to, but he was trying to teach them lessons about, you know, being better people, because a lot of them were like Eric was cowardly for no reason. Like, it's okay to be scared, but it's not okay to be scared all the time of nothing. And so, like, you know, trying to overcome your fears and that kind of stuff. He would make lessons for them about respecting each other and believing in each other. Hank, for example, didn't give Diana a lot of credit until like halfway through the series, when he had to really like step down and let her lead through a full episode. And there, of course, then he learns his lesson of like, I don't need to be the only leader. We can share that spot, and that kind of thing. And so there's just a lot of cool lessons like that were shown. Fun fact, Venger, the big bad guy of the show, is actually the Dungeon Master's kid, which is a cool reveal in the end as well. And like the Dungeon Master wants to save his kids from being corrupted and evil. So it's kind of a nice bookend for the show as well. And the kids get sent home, and like I said, in that epilogue that never aired. So I hope that this reignites some people to maybe go back and watch it, give it a chance, because I think, like I said, I think it's a pretty awesome show that's a little underrated. So other than that, that's all I got for you today. Anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up for the day?
No. Still exciting things coming down the pipeline. I'm sure everyone and their mothers are going to be excited when I get to reveal that. And so that's going to be fun. And as we do, I think you said 2 weeks later, we're going to do this again. I'm going to try and post some more stuff on my Twitter with the thread that I had going. So you can pay attention to that if you want to wait to see some content about what I think about things that are being previewed. Like before, I should share my thing and then the other thing, but and you can see me on Twitter and on Twitch under MichaelCrits. That's my name for everything that I do online. So pay attention to that. And I am in several, TTRPG shows. So if you like Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games, check me out there. I'm doing a lot, But thank you again, Commander, for having me on. It's always a pleasure